Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming, everyone. I wasn't expecting this much interest in the topic, so I'm really happy to see that. I think many of us have observed how gluten-free, wheat-free has become a pretty dominant theme when you're out shopping. Even mass market chains now carry quite a few gluten-free options. There's been a lot of celebrity attention even. I know that Dr. Oz's daughter, Daphne, for instance, wrote a really well-known book that was featured on Oprah on how she helped relieve a lot of health problems in college just by going wheat-free. There's an MD out there that wrote a book called Wheat Belly, which is getting a lot of attention right now. And it's a very interesting phenomena. I'm from the health food industry, so when it was low carb that was the fad, it did quite a lot actually for the growth of our sector. And then it just petered out. A lot of bad things happened with that diet, which aren't necessarily unrelated to this talk, because the Atkins diet was largely grain-free as well. And that's one of the reasons why I attribute great success to it, because it was implicitly wheat-free, as is the South Beach and the Hampton diet and the paleo diet. So what I find so interesting is that the sort of theoretical context is really missing. Like, people know they feel better. I've observed it personally. I've recommended this gluten-free diet to hundreds of people, including family and friends, who are more reluctant to take my advice. The more closer they are to you, they are more resistant. But I've observed quite amazing things happen. I personally had quite a lot of issues that were associated with really classical celiac, which is gastrointestinal disturbances. So, the original presentation since ancient times, because it was first observed in Greece, ancient Greece, was diarrhea, malodorous stools. Sometimes it's called steatorrhea. The fats just don't digest and they putrefy. Subsequent lack of absorption of nutrients, like malabsorption, bloating. Sometimes you'd have loss of weight, pretty severe, from inability to absorb anything, because what happens with celiac disease proper, the classical medically defined celiac disease, is that you see a autoimmune destruction of the villi lining the intestine. The villi are these little, it's like almost like beds of seaweed, just billions and billions of these little projectiles coming off the cells of the intestinal wall, the enterocytes. And without those projections, which have profound amount of surface area, I believe that if you were to spread across a two-dimensional plane, the surface area in our intestines, it's about the size of a tennis court, which is also why humans are very prone to obesity and weight problems, because we were designed to live through a lot of famine times, which is another thing we'll be talking about during this discussion. But intestinal issues, classically defined, you get a biopsy, that's the gold standard. If you see complete flattening of the villi, and then the crypts in between, like are these little valleys in between the little mountains, are also filled in with tissue. It's called hyperplasia. The tissue just grows, not serving a function. It's not really cancer, but it could be considered similar pathology. And so that's classical celiac, and it was once believed to be extremely rare, only afflicted Europeans, maybe 1 in every 10,000 people. And today, a huge body of research indicates that it is not actually that rare, and present figures are between about 1 in every 100, and now some are saying that maybe 1 in every 60 have classically defined celiac disease. So if they were to do a biopsy, they would discover it. The problem is the conventional medical community doesn't really know enough about it, not really trained to look at the connection between diet and illness. You have epidemic level disorders pop out of the void, like irritable bowel syndrome. And I'm not saying that wheat is the only cause of that symptom picture, but it's a really significant cause. And the medical literature, thankfully, is now vindicating that awareness. So, one of the things that I have up here is a PDF ebook I produced, which just covers 2 main essays I wrote on the topic, which also includes a quick reference guide to the National Library of Medicine's database on wheat-associated diseases. There's over 120 of them, and we'll kind of look at them real quick to see just how big a problem it is, even in the medical literature. So it's no longer really, what I want to do with this discussion is to shift the focus from what you might call the victim, which is the extremely rare case of a genetically determined intolerance to wheat. And I want to also kind of shift the debate away from this concept of wheat sensitivity and intolerance, as if somehow it's the perfect food and we're just not strong enough or not biologically capable enough to consume it in a way that's healthy for us. That's really what I'm trying to do, is look at the deeper levels to the problem. Before I go further, I should just say I'm available, for goodness sake, in Bonita Springs. It's a store that I've managed for about 10 years now, and I do their education. And we really like to focus on just providing information. The sales will come, but it's not really a big push of ours. We don't even advertise, for instance. We do like to do these sorts of free lectures, though. And then I do writing for different journals. I'm in the latest well-being journal on the topic of breast cancer. And then my website, Greenman Info, houses a lot of the research you're going to be hearing about today. I also provide a lot of support to Mercola.com, who is, Dr. Mercola wrote a book called The No Grain Diet. So, before I knew that, I was kind of just immersed in the research myself. It's so compelling. When you really look at the paleo diet and the idea that our bodies have evolved for millions of years on a specific diet that changed radically just about 10,000 years ago. Now that sounds like a lot of time. It's a nanosecond in biological time. Cultural time, it seems like forever. It is forever. So that's going to be also one of the things we talk about. So the two essays are available to view for free on my site, of course, and all the research I'll be discussing. There's no limitation there. Some of the broader strokes are weight gain. I'd like to really go more into detail, but when you look at the essays, you'll see there's such a volume of research, so I will be jumping around here and there. Weight gain is a big part of the problem. Now, although you have the autoimmune variety, again, relatively still marginalized, the celiac disease sufferer, they tend to lose weight. They can absorb anything. But then you have the other side of the spectrum, which is, why do they give wheat to animals before they slaughter them? They give it to them so they gain weight rapidly. And these are the animals that were designed to consume the grasses in sprouted form, not the seeds. And that would be your, the beef that we eat, almost every day here as Americans. So they give them the seed form later in their life cycle to put weight on quickly. Now, if they do it too early, they end up killing the animals. They end up developing acidosis, tissue pH gets really acidic. They end up getting abscesses in their liver, and then they have to give them antibiotics. It's really quite a nightmare. And these are the animals that spent thousands and thousands of years of just eating grass. But they can't handle a certain amount of the seed form. They actually develop a lot of degenerative conditions that are kind of linked to what you would call the diseases of affluence associated with the Western world, the grain-based model of being human. So weight gain is actually part of the picture, and in fact there are very specific mechanisms that have been identified. Wheat contains a specific substance called wheat lectin, which is insulin mimicking. It's called insulin mimetic. So it really just sends a signal to certain cells in your body: take sugar, turn it into fat. Okay, not to be burned as energy, but to store it. So that's one reason why when people remove wheat from their diet, within a week you start seeing weight loss. I mean, pretty significant. And it's often around the midsection, which is pretty characteristic of what they call hyperinsulinemia, where insulin goes too high and there's this constant signal to the cells: store fat. It's a lot of times in the midsection. And this is really the characteristic modern disease for Americans. It's known as metabolic syndrome. Midsection fat, elevated blood lipids, elevated blood sugar, elevated insulin, hypertension, chronic inflammation. That's a constellation of symptoms and or diseases they call metabolic syndrome. Well, wheat is actually one of those foods that I believe plays a pretty key portion of the problem. One of the most interesting things of all is that we are a society that, when it comes to supplements, spends close to $1 billion a year on eating the exoskeleton, of sea bugs, insects literally, like sea insects, like crabs and lobster and shrimp. Those pulverized shells are put into capsules and sold to you as glucosamine. And so that's really what people are eating. Now, I don't personally have a problem with that. I mean, I don't think it's really bad, you know, because they're bottom feeders or whatever. But why do we do that? Okay, is osteoarthritis, which is what it's used for, caused by a lack of pulverized shells from sea creatures? No, it isn't. But it's really effective. And some people claim, especially when they stop taking glucosamine, that their inflammation really starts to recede. Or when they stop taking it, they see it flare up. You know, because we're an anti-inflammatory addicted culture, right? Our NSAIDs we can't live without. We need our aspirin, our Tylenol, ibuprofen, our aspirin, our Vioxx, which again was ripped off the market because it was, you know, inducing heart attacks. Those anti-inflammatories are very dangerous. So I'd rather see people use glucosamine, of course, under the guidance of a physician. Check with your physician and make sure it doesn't interact with your medications. The point is this: is that wheat contains a specific, what's called lectin. Lectins are the invisible thorns of the plant kingdom, okay? Because they don't have the horns of a rhinoceros, they don't have claws, they look kind of helpless. We want to eat them. They taste good when you make pasta and bread from them. But you know what? They were designed to defend themselves from predation. So wheat technically contains this little invisible thorn that's been identified as wheat germ agglutinin, WGA it's called, and it selects for just two things in the body. One of which, okay, just so you know, lectin comes from the word origin select. Okay, very specific. It only attaches to two biomolecules in nature, and there's millions of them. One of them is celiac acid. What is celiac acid? Well, it's this mucousy, slippery surface that coats our nasal passages and our whole gastrointestinal tract. It even coats our blood vessels and arteries. And that slick substance protects us really from a lot of what they call antigens or things in our diet that we shouldn't be eating. So you eat something, you get all this mucus that forms. It's almost like having a cold. And your body's kind of telling you, don't eat that. It could be cow's milk products, it could be sugar, it could be something that your body just doesn't want it in. Well, wheat lectin was designed by nature to select for that specific substance. That substance is integral to all the natural predators of wheat, from fungi to bacteria to worms, insects, birds, reptiles, humans, just all the way up the food chain. So it's a very interesting fact. Now, okay, why am I saying this and talking about glucosamine? Because glucosamine is the other thing it selects for. So wheat is designed with this sort of laser-guided biomolecule that attaches just to glucosamine in your body, specifically N-acetylglucosamine. Now, N-acetylglucosamine is a building block for almost our entire body. Our epithelial tissue, you know, like the cells that line the intestinal wall, our cartilage, our connective tissue, and our neural tissue. So it even attaches to neural tissue or interacts with neurological cells, which will be interesting when you look at the research on neuropathy, schizophrenia, and autism, and all the other connections. So my thing is this: if you're taking glucosamine, or if you take a synthetic chemical like ibuprofen to relieve your pain and inflammation, sometimes if you remove the wheat, the inflammation just disappears because the cause has been removed. Otherwise, we're doing more of a palliative medicine. If you take a couple grams of glucosamine a day, split it out throughout your day, instead of the wheat lectin attaching to your intestinal membranes and getting into systemic circulation, which is the real problem, it'll attach to the dead bodies of the little sea bugs. I mean, it's pretty interesting. It's called chitin. I mean, insects are made of it too. So these long polymers of N-acetylglucosamine. So that's kind of one of the interesting things about wheat lectin. So inflammation, big part of what wheat does. And inflammation is behind so many diseases. I mean, all the chronic degenerative ones that afflict us, from osteoarthritis, cancer, diabetes, osteoporosis. Inflammation is key. Okay, you have issues like depression. Well, depression is psychospiritual as well as physical, so I'm not negating certain causes that are not just physical. However, we do know that wheat contains a broad spectrum of proteins. There's actually 23,000 different proteins in wheat. Actually 23,700 and something that have been identified this far. So when people talk about wheat or gluten intolerance, they're just talking about really this broad concept of there's a protein that's harmful in wheat. And there's just so many. And the reason is that wheat is the first truly genetically modified organism that we created through selective breeding. So we didn't take recombinant DNA technology and, you know, alter its structure the way they do today with GMOs, but we bred it in such a way that 3 distinct plants became one. Okay, that's called a hexaploid species. So basically, it has 3 sets of DNA inherited through its 3 different predecessors, and it's capable of producing. Actually, it has 6.5 times more genes than we do. We consider ourselves so complex, and really, we're not. In fact, this is going to be really important when we talk about why celiac disease isn't caused by the genes, which is really important for people to understand. So, I know a lot of this is kind of over people's heads, even my own, honestly, but I'll try to keep it more grounded if I can. Now, constipation. I mean, people are eating wheat glue, okay, because gluten is the Latin word for glue. You take wheat paste, or just basically flour, and you add water, and you add some newspaper, and you have pretty much concrete when it dries. You know? I mean, we love eating glue, and it's considered normal, whereas freaks like me who are like, you know, considered, you know, food fascists by their friends because I don't want to eat wheat, you know, and I don't eat wheat, people really look at me as a freak, but I'm not. I feel like, how can you eat something that would be impossible to break down? Here's the problem, is that we are monogastric, one stomach. If you look at the ruminant animals, like cows or goats, that have been designed to consume grasses for a very long time, they have a 4-chamber forestomach, and they basically ferment and break down that protein complex, which is basically disulfide-bound protein. Now, disulfide bonds are what you find in rubber. I mean, you vulcanize rubber with sulfur just to make it even more rubbery and indigestible. Your hair, when you burn it, smells kind of weird, sulfurous, because there's sulfur in it. You can't digest your hair. Well, that's what gluten in large part is made of, is disulfide bound. And humans were not designed to consume this type of food without doing things to it. I mean, you can cook it, you can try to break it down. You could do sourdough, which is really quite intelligent, because you're trying to break down all of these sticky proteins. Now, when you don't break proteins down and they putrefy in your gut, it leads to quite a lot of problems. Gastritis, acid reflux, you know, there's all these different words to describe what happens when wheat sits there and other opportunistic organisms come in and try to break it down for you. Many of them, when you ferment protein, produce hydrogen sulfide, which is extremely irritating gas. It's, I think, more deadly than certain types of cyanide gases. Now, in small amounts, it's essential for the health of our gastrointestinal tract. But when it gets to elevated levels, and people on proton pump inhibitors and acid blockers know what happens, I mean, sometimes it makes it far worse because you just made it impossible to break protein down. You need acid to do that. So a lot of people who get diagnosed with acid reflux or GERD, or, you know, they do the scope and they see the inflammation, it's really caused in part by the putrefaction of these sorts of proteins, is my understanding of it. So that's what we did to get around, is we tried to culture things, we tried to break it down, but unfortunately, when it comes to many of these proteins, it cannot be done. Even high heat, you can't break down wheat germ, gluten or wheat lectin, it's known as. It's just impossible. So let's see. Okay. So this is, again, a downloadable PDF on my site, but you can read the articles for free and you can access the research for free. I just did it for convenience and to try to generate some type of support for the website. So yeah, that's the funny thing about wheat. Its status is exalted, both secular and religious. Okay, so for me to come here and tell you that wheat somehow is not healthy sounds heretical, and it is. Because, you know, that's the Eucharist, right? That's the body of Christ. And for quite some time, as they began to recognize, the Catholic Church, that celiac disease was more common than previously believed and a serious, serious threat to health, even deadly, they started to make room for wheat-free version, but they held on for a very long time, and many places still only do wheat because that's considered a necessary spiritual food. Okay, and interestingly enough, if you buy Ezekiel 4:9, and this company probably dislikes me passionately because I even called their nutritionist to discuss an article I wrote because I was trying to expose the fact that the poster child of the health food industry, whole wheat bread, and especially sprouted Ezekiel 4:9, it's biblical, it sounds sacred even, isn't really using the type of wheat that Jesus ate or any of his contemporaries, because that was not the kind that we're talking about today. Today it's really common bread wheat. It's called heretical acidicum. I think I'm mispronouncing it, but we'll get into that in a minute. Now, the United Nations has an agency that is dedicated to just getting rid of global hunger, and it's called the Food and Agricultural Organization, and its emblem is the Latin motto, "Let there be bread." Okay, so as you can see, there's nothing more exalted than wanting to put an end to world hunger, you know. So, again, there's a lot of resistance to the concept that wheat is somehow harmful. In fact, it's the #1 cereal grass grown in temperate regions. There's going to be about 700 million tons of it, and this is just the seed again, produced this year. It's the third most commonly produced cereal grain in the world. So we're working against a lot of inertia when it comes to getting the awareness out. It's a globe-spanning organism, really. I mean, it's taken over so much biodiversity on the planet that one issue alone is reason to take pause when we think about elevating it to the sacred status, because when you take away your biodiversity and you do this monoculturing, you just have corn or you have soy or you have wheat, thousands of acres, you leave it open to basically locusts or plagues, or basically the plants are more susceptible. So that's one big problem, because the world now depends on wheat production, and if it fails, then a good number of us will starve on this planet. So that's another interesting aspect to why wheat isn't really as good a thing as we think it is, especially when you get into the way agribusiness works and the type of pesticides that are used, etc., and the type of forests that are destroyed just to produce more. Okay, so the basic premise here, celiac disease is living testimony to the lesser known dark side of wheat. My premise is that wheat intolerance, or the incompatibility between our species, is universal, okay? And that at one point, genetically speaking, every single human, okay, our ancestral lineage from which all of us came 60,000 years ago or beyond that, or if, again, you're more of a religious sort of fundamentalist view, the Garden of Eden, okay? There weren't even grains there. It was a fruit type of food that was presented in that document. So what happened is, over the course of the evolution of Western civilization, there were a number of die-offs, bottlenecks that literally whole groups of people passed through in quite dramatic fashion. A quick example of this is in Ireland, because Ireland was not conquered by the Roman Empire, and the Romans were actually known, their empire was known as the Wheat Empire, because largely it depended on access to and conversion of conquered peoples to the agrarian mode, basically growing, consuming, trading wheat. That was the basis of the Roman Empire. And so there were certain regions that resisted being conquered. Certain regions in Germany, Finland, Norway, and still today, the highest levels of celiac disease prevalence are found in those regions geographically. And because when they did introduce it, it probably caused dramatic die-offs in certain individuals. That celiac disease, I mean, if you really think about it, any of you here may know personally, in the part per million range, okay, we're talking about infinitesimal amount of gluten contamination can induce life-threatening autoimmune destruction of your intestinal wall. I mean, it's so sad when you meet people who are afflicted with this. I mean, I talk at the celiac societies where it's just people who are just threatened by anything, because they can ask their waiter not to, it does have wheat in it, and there's always some type of byproduct from wheat that's contaminating your food. So it's very hard to live with that. But that's how serious the problem is. It's that toxic. So is it that they're just genetic freaks, and that for whatever reason they can't handle an intrinsically wholesome food? Or is it they're an extreme representation of a universal intolerance that we all participate in, and that most of us, it's really asymptomatic? We don't really see that kind of clinical presentation, or they sometimes call it out-of-intestine varieties of celiac disease. Now, how can I say that? Well, genetics really has come in recently and supports this, because 20 to 30% of the world's population has the gene for celiac disease on chromosome 6. HLA, human leukocyte antigen, DQ8 and 2. So you can go to many different races on the planet, and you can go to Africa, you can go to China, you can go to India, and you'll find the prevalence of the gene is extremely high. So that's what makes it so fascinating to me, is that it's not a rare disease. So yeah, this is just a quick view of the intestinal wall as it degenerates. Okay, and here's just some of the research that I want to show you, because it's been about 3 years of investigating this specific health problem. And I'm not satisfied just with theory. I mean, my background is a philosophy degree, and people sometimes think that that's ridiculous because, you know, this is a medical type of thing that I do with 3 Minute Info. But for me, it's just a pursuit of truth and, you know, using whatever disciplines at your disposal to figure it out. Science, anthropology, art, anything. But because of that lack of a background with science proper, you know, I decided I would embark on a very laborious project, which is go on the National Library of Medicine, and anyone can do this. It's got 21 million citations going back to 1950 and beyond from 5,000 plus peer-reviewed journals, biomedical life science journals, and you can kind of Google it. Go in there, write wheat in, pick a disease of your choice, and you'll find any number of studies. Now, the way we have it organized is, obviously, celiac disease is the main one you find, and I only scratched the surface. 108 articles. Wheat intolerance, gluten sensitivity. They're all just different names for intolerance to wheat. And there's a lot of confusion, again, as to what is the right one to call it. Autoimmune diseases. The most interesting at first was schizophrenia. Because back in the 60s, they noticed when you took schizophrenics, certain of them, put them on a gluten-free diet, some of them would go into remission, or their condition would improve so dramatically that it was just so shocking to these researchers. So at least 12 studies on schizophrenia responding to a gluten-free diet. Now we should probably pause there a moment, because why is that? Well, this is probably the most interesting of all facts about wheat, is it has a number of opioid peptides, okay? Now opiates are naturally secreted by our body. In fact, women breastfeeding secrete morphine literally in their breast milk. When you have an infection, your body actually produces literal morphine. Okay? And cow's milk has casomorphin. I mean, opioids are throughout nature. If you eat meat, there's an opioid-like substance in it. If you take lettuce, I mean, it's so potent an opiate, they used to make a drug out of it. Just lettuce juice extract. So with gluten, you have a number of them. One of them is glidorphin. And it sounds kind of like endorphin because that's what you produce endogenously in the brain. That's like basically morphine. And then you have 4 to 5, depending on the source I'm reading, different gluten-exorphins they're called. And they all interact with these opioid receptors throughout the body. So what I'm saying is it's actually quite addictive. I mean, people love, I mean, they will die for a good, you know, fresh, you know, baked loaf of bread and a little butter on it. I mean, it is so, I can't resist it myself. That's why I stopped eating it, because I don't have the willpower. Certain things are just too good. I can't stop eating them. And it's because of that addictive property that also reflects in certain neurological conditions like autism and ADHD, a lot of cerebral issues, ataxia. So it has a it is basically a pharmacologically active substance. Now that's the tip of the iceberg, even with this particular part of it, because it's high in glutamic acid and aspartic acid. These are 2 excitotoxic amino acids found in nature. They make things taste good, though. So like, if you're eating something with MSG on it, you just really can't stop yourself from wanting more, because it sends signals to the hypothalamus that you're not hungry. And it's found at extremely high levels in gluten, because gluten is actually classified as a prolamine protein. Prolamines are found throughout the cereal grasses. So you have avinin in oats, you have seculin in rye, hordein in barley. They're all called design in corn. It's all prolamines. Now prolamines are lysine proline rich. And they have a lot of, they're proline glutamine rich. Okay, so glutamine and glutamic acid stimulate that receptor in your tongue, which the Japanese call umami, the taste. You know, they invented MSG from, I think it was kelp originally. So when you eat bread or something with wheat, it is an immediate taste sensation. You just want to eat it, and then a good maybe half an hour, a little bit later, the peptides start to break down, and you get that kind of food coma. That's when people normally want to have a cup of coffee or maybe smoke a cigarette, shot of whiskey or something, just to kind of stimulate themselves again. So it's a pretty common phenomenon. There's this kind of like this vicious cycle with food, and wheat, if you really observe yourself, if you're going to continue to try eating it regularly, does have those addictive properties. Let's see. I'm going to flip. There's so many things here. Actually, herpetiformis dermatitis, which is sounds like something from Harry Potter, you know, but it basically looks like you have herpes, and it's caused by wheat. It's a classically defined, very well-known wheat side effect known in dermatology. Psoriasis as well, there's a connection. What was I going to say? Diabetes type 1. I mean, so interesting. It's a diabetogenic food, at least it has the potential to be, because basically, you know, that's number one is when your immune cells destroy the beta cells in your pancreas, the ones that produce insulin. And there's some type of confusion that happens. It's called lack of self-tolerance. The immune system stops recognizing its own cells as being self and says, oh, that's other. Well, what they've identified is that there are proteins in wheat that are capable of activating these HLA, human leukocyte antigen, what are they called? They're like carbohydrate projections off the surface of the cell. And that's like a red flag saying, hey, immune system, attack me, I'm different now. So that's what's so fascinating about food, is that there's a whole field known as nutrigenomics that looks just at the interaction between nutrients and your genes. And there's a direct interaction. It's not necessarily immune mediated either, meaning you don't have to be classically defined with an autoimmune condition to be damaged by wheat. The wheat actually attaches to the healthy cell surface, changes the way that it looks to the immune system, and then the immune system comes and attacks it. Whereas the former view is really, it's just the immune system, for whatever reason, doesn't know what it's doing, just attacks the body, from, you know, really without any logic. So there's okay. So I know it's kind of going all over the place, so I try to bring it back down in terms of understanding this. Basically, my argument is that you don't have to have an immune-mediated problem with wheat, that the wheat directly adversely affects the cells in our body. And it doesn't require that you go in and get a test for celiac or an antibody test, because that's really what they do, is they look for anti-gliadin antibodies, which is one of the main proteins in wheat associated with the problem, or endomycin. There's a number of them that they look at. Even if you have no antibodies, no visible clinical sign that you have intolerance, I believe that you are, and that our bodies are adversely affected by it. Now, sometimes it's better to just throw all this jargon and all these concepts away and just try it, because that's really what I've seen, and that's what encouraged me to do all the research, is I saw how profoundly it adversely affected people. Yes, ma'am?
Are you talking about development of leaky gut syndrome?
Yeah, that's one of the things. See, there's something that happens when gliadin, okay, is one of the many proteins in gluten, okay, because gluten, again, is this big category. It's alcohol-soluble, and the form that causes celiac, okay, is alpha-gliadin. That substance has been shown to upregulate a protein in the intestinal wall called zonulin, which then basically opens up these gaps between the enterocytes, the little intestinal cells that line our entire gastrointestinal tract, right? Basically what happens then, it causes intestinal permeability. And this happens in people that have no celiac disease, no genetic predisposition. It's a universal problem. And what happens after you open up the intestinal wall, even just slightly, is that contents naturally within your stomach enter the bloodstream, and then any one of those 23,700 proteins could enter the blood and then cause the immune system to say, oh my gosh, what is this? Is this self or other? I'm just going to start attacking. And that's really one of the big problems. I call that opening Pandora's bread box, which is my second essay in the series, because it really looks at the way in which wheat, by its very design, okay, it's very similar to viruses. Wheat lectin, about the size of a virus on some level, attaches directly to the slippery protective mucus coat, and then it causes a breakdown of that protection, and then enters through inside, causing basic permeability. Afterwards, all the other proteins have much easier entry into the body. Now, here's a way to look at it, okay? Celiac disease or wheat intolerance is like a gun, right? It's sort of a genetic gun. It could go off. The bullets are the wheat, but without a trigger, it isn't necessarily going to express itself acutely or in any kind of obvious way. It takes an event. It could be an intestinal infection. That's what's so fascinating about this is that, okay, H1N1, hemagglutinin type 1, it's like a little claw on the virus that attaches to the surface of the cells. It could be in the nasal patches, wherever. And then you have neuraminidase type 1. That's what H1N1 is. And that enzyme, neuraminidase, is exactly what wheat lectin attaches to, celiac acid. So there's a very similar nature between viruses and lectins. And that's why they say starve or fever, is that if you end up contracting influenza, and then you have this breakdown, or basically the virus is trying to get through that sticky coat into systemic circulation, that's when you don't eat, because the lectins then cause the problem to be far larger. And all these foods you've been eating for so long, it could be nightshades, it could be wheat, it could be cow's milk, suddenly become a big problem. And then that establishes later an autoimmune problem. And it's sustained by these food antigens or lectins. So it explains why some people have eaten wheat their whole life. Some event occurs. It could even be stress. Acute stress will deplete you of glutamine, which is the primary fuel source for the intestinal cells. And it could also cause permeability, even within a matter of days, because in 2 days, your intestinal cells regenerate. So you have to give continual support nutritionally to those cells. So that's what's, there's complexity here, of course. So the trigger that makes that gun go off is something as simple as a stressful event, chemical exposure. It could be a virus or a bacteria that suddenly takes over you until it's gone again. So yeah, intestinal permeability is a big part of the problem. And that's something that, like if you ever had, I think it's called a LCAT, or it's a LISA, it's an antibody panel. They look at maybe 300-400 different foods in your diet and you can see, wow, I'm producing antibodies to cheese. Well, it's obvious. My immune system thinks it's the enemy. That could be why I'm not feeling good. And you'll see these people do the tests and they'll have 50 or 100 different things that the immune system apparently is just kind of upset that are in your body. Well, that's because the Pandora's box was open, the intestinal permeability is causing constant influx of undigested proteins. Now, this is a real fascinating fact about wheat. Because there's so many proteins to select from, there's one called 33-mer. It's an abbreviation for 33 amino acids long. And because it's not broken down, right, you want to break those amino acids down so you can reconstitute them as protein in your own body. So instead, because of intestinal permeability, they go into the blood. Well, that particular very virulent protein has the exact same molecular sequence as protactin, which is the primary toxic substance in whooping cough pathogen, which is called pertussis. They even take protactin and put it in vaccines just because it jacks the immune response up and causes all kinds of increased antibody titers, which isn't necessarily healthy. That's one of my big criticisms of vaccines, is it doesn't mean that the antibody has affinity to the antigen. It just means you threw the chemical sink into the tissue to try to startle the immune system. It's like kicking a beehive. So that's the fascinating thing about wheat, is it's got this protactin-like protein, and it's only one of 23,000. So I can only imagine the types of confusion it causes in the body, especially since we weren't designed to consume it from day one. It was something that, this is going to help you all understand. Okay, after going through, there's 129 diseases here, and you can keep going down. They're all on my site. And 16 different identified pharmacological actions that are adverse, like their neurotoxicity. Teratogenic is actually because of birth defects and miscarriages. That's a big issue with recurrent miscarriages. Immunotoxic, immunoreactive, proliferative, because it can cause this hyperproliferation of the intestinal cell wall. Cardiotoxic, I mean, this is such an interesting topic. We can talk about that later. Diabetogenic, goes on and on. And again, I'm not even close to being finished. There's thousands of more studies to look at on this topic. Yeah, let's see.
How do you know the studies you're reading are valid studies, though? A lot of times the number in the study is small, and so that is a problem with a lot of studies, and a lot of times they're short rather than extended.
Yeah.
So how can you evaluate whether or not these articles that you're saying that there are 80 of or 3 of or whatever are actually valid research projects?
Well, because I don't really think there's like a powerful wheat lobby. It's not like with drug companies, for example. It's very co-opted. We know they don't have to publish adverse results, and they manipulate, they ghostwrite. There's a lot of problems with that, with money influencing the science. With wheat, I think it really, I just don't see that kind of bias coming up. It's pretty objective. But, you know, again, I'm shocked by what I found. I haven't really gone over the exact studies with you in detail, but if you really look at them, because I'm just showing you the quick summary, it's called, where it just interprets how much, but each study you can read in its entirety. I mean, it's pretty interesting. The prevalence of wheat intolerance in cases like just ADHD are very high. I can't recall the exact number. It could be 20, maybe 30% have the anti-alpha-gliadin antibody. Certain types of liver disease. It's just fascinating. But it's a judgment call for
Who
sure.
have written the research articles? Are dietitians or?
Not dietitians. Those are the practitioners. These are
Right.
the researchers. So these are people with PhDs usually.
Right,
You know,
dietitians
professors.
have PhDs also. So I
Well,
was just
but they're not
wondering.
researchers. They're practicing. They're not actually doing like clinical research, like doing clinical trials or, you know, animal studies, for example. I mean, this is peer-reviewed medical literature, like the Journal of Gastroenterology, JAMA, Lancet. I mean, these are the articles that we're referencing because they're all from the National Library of Medicine. They're not. There's a peer review process that is so stringent, so that's why it's so powerful. But that's why I encourage you to look at that, because if I just did the presentation and didn't provide the research for you to confirm or deny, it wouldn't be as potent in my opinion. But I'm giving you more of a philosophical overview, and it may be confusing. One of the interesting things that I think we talked about was the spread of wheat through the ancient world. I won't go to great detail here, but it was interesting that wheat was actually considered, they would deprive soldiers of wheat rations if they misbehaved. So they'd give barley instead. They'd get about 3 pounds a day. So that's an interesting fact, that they were potentially quite dependent and addicted to it. It was a way of controlling their behavior. And this is exactly what happened in ancient Rome, was that the bread and circuses were used to control the population. It was in 140 BC that they decided to do the it was sort of like a political agenda, you know, cheap food and entertainment. And this was one way in which their society was founded and it was controlled. The way the history stories go is that, you know, they depleted their treasury, importing luxury items, spices from India, and could no longer support food giveaways or the army, and it led to the collapse of the Roman Empire. It's fascinating history. You can always look more in detail on that one.
May I ask you a question?
Yeah.
There are different types of old-fashioned wheat. And are those protein wheats or are those
Well,
other types of?
with the amount of protein,
Well, I'm just wondering, are any of the wheats or
Yeah.
grasses, are any of them things that people who have a problem with wheat
yeah.
could eat or
Yeah.
should eat? Because I was told that the spelt bread
Yeah.
was good to eat.
Well, for those with wheat intolerance, you could call it, spelt would be a better choice. In celiac disease, it's not considered safe. Certain celiac societies, for example, think that oats are okay, some do not. Like Canada says oats are fine. And I've seen research confirming that. I've seen a little bit of research denying that. That's an exceptional grain. It has a lot of benefits. In fact, one of them is that it helps with intestinal permeability. That's for oats. Not in everyone. But the interesting thing is this, is if you look at the type of food wheat is, it falls within a superfamily of plants called monocotyledonous plants. I think it's like 500,000 members. The opposite end is dicotyledonous plants, about the same amount of members. Monocots have one leafed embryo, so that's where your cereal grasses are. They're just one leaf. Then you have the two-leafed, which includes fruit-bearing trees, and that's in the other family. Now there's certain dicots that are perceived as being grains, which are not. So quinoa, buckwheat, amaranth. Buckwheat sounds like it's a grass or but it's not. It's closer to a fruit. And it's more in line with the concept that we would have foraged and naturally consumed those, because if you try eating wheat without cooking it, and without having a civilization to make pyrotechnology possible, and the utensils needed to cook it, and all the things that come with it, pottery, it would be impossible to consume it without getting really sick. I mean, if anyone here tries eating a handful of uncooked wheat, you know, you get the concept. Whereas you can pick quinoa, amaranth, buckwheat right off the plant and eat it. So that's one of the interesting things. Now, they've done genetic evaluations of different species, right? So like, if you look at turkeys, or if you look at rats, they're better suited to metabolize monocot grains like wheat than we are. Even though we're closer to, technically speaking, a cow. You know, I mean we're, basically, the idea is that genetically speaking, we haven't had enough time to accommodate this transition in diet. Because if you go to the Paleolithic period, we're coming off the last ice age, right? About 20,000 years ago was the beginning, they believe, of the agrarian mode, where people were no longer in nomadic hunting tribes, digging up tubers with sticks, eating the many options in terms of meat that were available. You had the birth of the agrarian mode of existence, where you're basically settling down in civilizations and you're farming and you're gathering the little seeds off these plants. Not very nutrient dense, takes a huge amount of effort. So there are a lot of selective pressures involved. You know, there weren't as many mammalian herds to consume. So that was a big portion of why. And there's also the concept that a few Australian biologists have, that it's because of the addictive properties of grains that enabled us to focus so much attention and energy and transform our whole way of being into eating them. And gluten, and wheat in particular, has probably the greatest addictive properties that I know of.
What about rice? Rice is...
Yeah, rice is technically gluten-free, and so there are many issues with grains. But if I'm going to choose a grain, I would probably go with rice. Occasionally I'll eat spelt. Spelt's really close to wheat.
How do you spell that?
Spelt, or S-P-E-L-T.
Oh, okay.
The thing too, just to understand about grains, is that they're composed of starch. Starch is sugar. It's glucose. It's just, you know, complex in such a manner that it doesn't break up down as quickly as pure, like maltodextrin or glucose. But when you cook it, I mean, when you cook rice, for example, and you do rice chips or puffs, it makes your blood sweeter than white sugar. It's about 110 on the glycemic index versus about 80 for sucrose. So that gives you a sense then that even though it doesn't taste sweet, I mean, it is going to, in some people, induce insulin release, then it's going to turn right to fat. So grains, you know, our bodies are made of protein and fat and micronutrients. That's really what our bodies are made of. Carbohydrate is there to fuel our body. Glucose is the primary unit that we need in all our cells, almost all of them, to produce energy. So it's really what fuels it, but when you consume excessive amounts and you don't feed the other aspects of what our body is composed of, which is what grains just don't fulfill that for us. Now when we feed the grains to our animals and then eat them, the problem is even amplified further, because they produce huge amounts of inflammatory byproducts by consuming grains. The marbling in the steak that you see, if you do grass-fed, you don't normally see that, and if you do see the fat, it's a good kind of fat generally. But you know, either way you look at it, even if you think you're eating a lot of meat and it's not so much grain-based, you really are eating a lot of grains and inadvertently and a lot of byproducts. Yeah, I know the conversation maybe got a little sidetracked here, but any questions or anything that I didn't really cover very well? Yes?
I just have a question because I'm going to have to leave in about 10 minutes. Do you have any cookbooks to recommend?
I don't really, but there are a lot of good ones. And you know, our cafe, the store, we do mainly wheat-free. There's some suggestions there if anyone wants to take a look at what they produce. But you know, the thing about the wheat-free diet is there are so many wheat-free options now. It's almost overwhelming. I mean, you can get wheat-free bread, pasta, cereal, crackers. You could eat a very grain-based diet. They usually substitute it with like corn or some other type of grain, rice. So that's always an option. I would say to be realistic. I mean, and also, you know, people come down to Florida and they enjoy going out, and that's the social life here. I don't like not being able to eat everywhere. You know, I'd love to go to an Italian restaurant. I mean, it's one of my favorite types of food, but it's kind of hard to eat wheat-free. So if you're gonna try it, you might want to just go, do wheat-free, not grain-free is what I'm saying. Because you could go grain-free and you could lose 15 pounds in a month if you have that to lose. It's amazing what happens when you eliminate grains from the diet. And how you feel. Because you don't really have that endocrine roller coaster as much. Yeah, I'm not as good of a speaker, lecturer, as I am a writer. So, seriously, I was reading my work and I was like, I wrote that before I came. So, it's very difficult sometimes to try to translate the science without it sounding pretty crazy or even a little bit boring. But if you do need encouragement, there's plenty of it on my site, and hopefully that will help. I didn't really talk about one thing. Does anyone here, you don't have to say, I guess if you have celiac, but is anyone here concerned about celiac because maybe they have someone who's okay? Good. Well, I think it's important to understand that after the Human Genome Project basically was completed, the first draft in 2003, the holy grail of biology and medicine was basically, if you find the genes in the human body, then we can understand and unlock the mystery of what disease is and how to cure it. Well, what they found to their great dismay was that instead of 100,000 different genes at the minimum, because that's how many proteins there are. You have one gene, one protein, and then from there, that's how your cells are made. They only found 25,000 genes. So they couldn't even explain or account for the building blocks of our body, much less the complex behavior that those proteins express in disease or health. And so that's what's so fascinating, because only 1% or less of diseases that we know of are known as monogenic, caused by a single error in a nucleotide sequence. And celiac is traditionally believed to be that kind of disease. And yet, 5% of people with, quote, classically defined celiac disease don't even have that genetic, what's called haplotype. They don't have that gene on chromosome 6. And then you have up to 30% of the rest of the world that does have that gene. And they don't have, quote, celiac expressed in the traditional way. So what I'm saying is that there are factors beyond the control of the genes, okay? They're called epigenetic, okay, and they're related to diet, they're related to environmental exposures, they're related to how you feel. Even your mind directly affects the expression of your genes. And so what I'd like to do is get people to stop thinking about celiac in the victim-oriented model and in the glorify wheat model, which is wheat is intrinsically good and celiacs are kind of a genetic freak because they just happen to be really intolerant to it and it just doesn't make sense. It's not that way at all. That is an extreme example of an intolerance that, again, I believe was extremely common, and that because of many generations of dying off slowly in some cases acutely. I think one source I read said that when they introduced wheat through the Romans, in a certain sector of Ireland, about 20 to 30% of the population died, dysentery-like symptoms. Or African slaves brought over where they had no exposure to gluten, up to 90% died of, quote, dysentery, because they were given wheat porridge. So when you die off and you can't reproduce, then of course those genes disappear. And that's why you still see it laid out when you look at the ancient world and Rome's influence. So anyway, I think there's a compelling argument there, because if you look at all of the possible adverse effects from wheat, and you're dealing with all these diseases that are being heavily medicated or supplemented, it's palliative medicine, right? Suppress the symptom, and that's the point of medicine. Well, not really. The point is to remove the cause and to do it through your food. Food is medicine. So that means eliminating certain foods that are very poisonous. Yes?
Sorry. Could you explain the difference between celiac and gluten intolerant?
That's what I'm trying to do that. My understanding is that, okay, there is a distinct difference in this sense. With celiac disease, you have both an innate immune response and an adaptive immune response to that protein. So you have two sides of your immune system just really freaking out and specifically destroying the intestinal wall. So in gluten sensitivity, you might not see intestinal villi atrophy, you might not see that damage, but you see someone who has severe speech disorders, or who has chronic depression, or who has elevated blood sugar. I mean, there's so many ways in which wheat intolerance expresses itself. Neuropathies. I mean, osteoarthritis, like I said, with the whole glucosamine picture. I mean, if anyone really thinks about why they take glucosamine and why it works, it's got to be because of the pro-inflammatory properties of wheat to some degree. It's just the design of nature. That's the way things are supposed to work. You don't eat a food that attacks the glucosamine in your body, causing inflammation. So that's I think, so gluten intolerance or sensitivity is better in the sense of people understanding that you don't have to be diagnosed with celiac disease to not, you would benefit from eliminating it. That's basically the conclusion. But I still, again, like to shift the debate. Don't blame the victim, the people who are eating wheat because they're being told for thousands of years it's great for them. Let's just say that wheat intrinsically is not meant to be consumed by humans, and that some have done a better job of adapting to it. If you look at some of the European lineages, they produce lactose after the age of 2, which you're not really supposed to normally, and that's because they had a genetic adaptation because they consumed cow's milk for many thousands of years more than, let's say, your Native Americans or your Africans, and that's just the nature of how the body works.
I've been diagnosed as gluten intolerance, not celiac,
Yes.
and yet I treat it as celiac because I have no symptoms. I don't have any of the celiac
Yeah.
symptoms, which are pros and cons,
Yeah.
because if you make a mistake, I don't know it.
Well, that's a good point. And that's how, yeah, that's the difference is, I guess, the level of suffering, how acute it is, how careful you have to be. Because with celiac, you have to be extremely careful. There's even gluten in basic over-the-counter prescribed vitamins. You know, it's just, it's everywhere. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned, Jess, if you have celiac disease, if you just have a tiny bit of gluten, that it will destroy the wall of the intestines. Just, right, over time,
Yeah.
exactly. How does that happen? In other words,
Yeah.
why is it an
Yeah.
over time period?
Well, what happens is that there's the alpha-gliadin they've identified, that one alcohol-soluble part of the gluten complex, that an enzyme inside of the cell wall that it's being exposed to, tissue transglutaminase, tries to, what they call deamidate it, take out, I believe it's the glutamine amino acid, and it becomes, kind of gets stuck there. The enzyme just kind of sits there, and it causes the T cells to come in and just attack that complex. So they can't differentiate any longer between the gluten toxin or the cell that's trying to break it down. So that's a very...
Pac-Man kind of thing, where all the
Pac-Man,
little
yeah.
Pac-Men come in and eat away at stuff.
Yeah. What's interesting is if you look at breastfeeding studies, those who are breastfed have a far lower chance of developing celiac. So yeah, that's what's so interesting, is the gene doesn't determine the outcome. It's a part of the picture, but there's so many factors that will maybe incite a lifelong autoimmune condition. I'm under the belief that, in theory, you could probably reverse celiac and attenuate it. In fact, a lot of the researchers are trying to find ways to engineer wheat that doesn't have that protein, or enzymes that break it down, and there is one that's available that breaks down gluten into a non-toxic protein. But again, I still don't like that concept. I'd rather just remove that food and try to eat something that's more in line with our biological ancestry.
What foods, what grains do you recommend since you're wheat free? What do you eat?
Well, you know, one thing I do sometimes is quinoa. Like instead of toast with an egg in the morning, the quinoa takes only, it almost looks like rice, although it's much lighter. It takes only about 5 to 10 minutes to cook. And it just combines so well. You know, because technically, according to the laws of food combining, you're not supposed to mix starch with protein like an egg, because it's harder to break down, and a lot of specific reasons. But quinoa is an option, and you know, really, I mean, I've even done kale steamed and like seasoned or sautéed with an egg, and it's the most amazing combination. It's kind of ideal, and that's kind of what the Atkins diet was in concept. High nutrient, low carbohydrate foods that could be combined, you know, with like a high quality protein source. It's a challenge because, you know, I ethically, ecologically, morally don't love eating animals. I mean, you know, I wouldn't want to be eaten by one, but and it's, you know, but still, genetically, and what's most comfortable, I'm like blood type O. I'm archetypally designed to consume animal, you know, flesh, but I don't necessarily think it's the best thing for other reasons. So you just have to kind of find your own diet. But what we really all need is fruits and vegetables, less grains, because we can get carbohydrate from another source. Doesn't mean we can't consume grains, but at least consider eliminating wheat, which is not the staff of life. It's more like a crutch.
Do you eat like the Ezekiel, do you eat the Ezekiel bread? or-
No, my second article, again, was on the topic of how the sprouted wheat, technically, take 30 days after you sprout that wheat berry, yes, the gluten content has been significantly removed, so that's not even much of an issue for many people, but the wheat lectin content, because if you're sprouting and your tip of your leaf is exposed to animals who want to munch on it, that's where that wheat lectin accumulates, as well as the root tips, because you have bacteria trying to eat that plant. So wheat lectin is well known to concentrate in that periphery. And so technically, even wheatgrass would be considered a potential problem, which is another poster child of our industry. Now, I will say wheat lectin isn't just evil, and that there are studies showing it can suppress pancreatic cancer growth, for example. So there's everything in nature has some benefit if used appropriately, but the sprouted wheat breads can cause, in theory, more osteoarthritis and inflammation than processed white bread. That's the real clincher. Because if you take out the embryo of the wheat berry, where a lot of the wheat lectin is concentrated, well, you've just removed a lot of the osteoarthritis generating part of the plant. So I don't think anyone should eat processed wheat. But it's interesting how some people have told me they've switched from white bread based diet, and then their wives were like smart and they went in and they got some Ezekiel bread from us, and before you know it, the guy's more inflamed, and it's our fault because and it really kind of is, because there's complexity obviously to the problem. I would eliminate the entire thing, and then if you feel like it's a worthy experiment, reintroduce it. That's when you normally notice its effect, is that it's become normal for us after a meal to just want to conk out, and some of us self-medicate that way. That's the way we go to sleep. But if you remove it and you start feeling difference and you feel lighter, it's sort of like a mental straitjacket. Sometimes you just kind of feel sluggish and you have this that feeling like you got to drink coffee compulsively, or a lot of things that are problems can go away. It's very interesting. Yes, ma'am?
So if you wanted a sandwich, what would you recommend?
You just got to take kale. You just clump it together. And no, I'm with you. What you do is you could eat wheat-free bread. There are great brands. Yeah, you have
The gluten-free?
Yes, like Udi's brand is quite amazing. It's found UDI apostrophe S. I tell you, they do granolas, they do pizza crust.
How do you spell that one bread?
Oh, it's UDI apostrophe S. UDI apostrophe S. They just happen to be one of my paid sponsors, so I'm trying to just show them. But really, if you go into our
Is it
store,
really bread if it's wheat-free? Is that?
yeah, well, that's the interesting thing, is it was selectively bred for all these thousands of years to contain high gluten because of it's essential for bread making purposes and for that glutinous, gooey quality. Which again, that's why the bread and circuses relied on bread to control the people. It's basically welfare.
Your Udi's, is it?
Oh,
is it
it's
actually
pretty
a
good.
bread, or is it not a bread?
It's a bread, yeah. You can do bread without wheat, but the better the grain
Is it
is.
potato, or is it rice?
No,
or
it's
what?
like rice tapioca, I believe.
Rice
They've done a good job of making it so you wouldn't know the difference.
There are some UDs that are tough and it's chewy. It's not as good as regular bread. But there are, if you take the bread and go like this, you'll see that it's a little softer. It's more like bread we're used to.
Where'd you
You
find
mean
that?
like white bread?
I'm Whole Foods
Which
for
is
one
like bread
place.
we used to.
I'm
Yeah.
sure they have.
So we carry it in any health food store now carries it, even the large ones. And Trader Joe's will be opening soon. We have a lot of people who buy Sammy's bread. It's this bakery out of Tampa, and they do it fresh. And it's more like a traditional, almost like a white bread is what the texture, but they do use whole grain. They use millet and brown rice. So you can do breads and pizzas and whatnot. But if you do this diet, you may find when you eliminate or reduce your wheat, and you incorporate more vegetable source carbohydrates, it just transforms your health. I mean, because that's the thing. It's like you look at kale, you're going to find several thousand compounds that are beneficial to health. And if you look at rice, I mean, you have starch. Most of the vitamins and fats are oxidized or gone. And it's just yummy. I love grains, but they don't satiate you. There's a specific mechanism. You don't have the leptin, it's called, that activates with your hypothalamus and causes you to not be hungry. There's a lot of different hormones involved when you eat grains. The word bulimia comes from hungry as a cow. I mean, because when you just eat these grasses forever, you're never satisfied. And I think humans really respond well to that. So, yes.
Psyllium that's used, for like Nebulous or something, is that a bad product?
Psyllium isn't really bad, I think. I think it's a good source of fiber. Not for everyone, but there are brands that are organic. We like Organic India because with psyllium, a lot of it is sprayed or has contamination, so we're not fond of the non-organic form. Organic India, they make great psyllium products. That is always a good thing. So, anyway, yes, ma'am?
Where is your store?
It's in the Sunshine Plaza where Ace Hardware, Gold's Gym, right next. It's a different gym by name now. So that's where we are. We have quite a lot. I mean, we probably have the most gluten-free of any store in Southwest Florida, just because the owner was into gluten-free, wheat-free decade before I even worked before him. So he was really brought into the area. But yeah, it's interesting. So if anyone needs any additional information, you can always go to my site. If you go, you'll see down below now. There's all these health articles. Because it's kind of technical stuff, so I'm trying to make it more layperson oriented. The first one is called The Dark Side of Wheat, and it links to all the research I'm talking about right now. And the site is GreenMed.info on that card. And there's there's a lot of information. I really appreciate everyone coming, and hopefully, if any of you decide to do it and go wheat free, and you have any feedback, please let me know, because it's always really encouraging to hear other people have success.
What is your website?
It's greenmedinfo.com.
Card.
I've got the card. Oh, a question then?
I was wondering if there's a certain vitamin you would recommend for someone with celiac disease.
Oh, vitamin, yeah. In fact, I have a page on my site just dedicated to celiac disease. It's called Celiac disease. It's one of the 2,500 ailments that are indexed there. But it has research from peer-reviewed medical journals on different substances that are good for celiac. One of them is B-complex, significant effects on recovery. After they're diagnosed and they go on the vitamin, they see depression and other things start to be attenuated. Probably about 10 or 15 studies on things that may be especially beneficial for those with celiac disease.
And is there a particular brand that can be dissolved a little bit better?
Yeah, coenzymated B-complex by New Chapter is probably the best I can think of for someone with any kind of malabsorption issue. So New Chapter makes it, you can just look for B vitamins by New Chapter, and they're excellent. Nutritional yeast is another good one. Just sprinkle it on your popcorn, use it as a flavor enhancer.
Would you repeat that?
Nutritional yeast?
Yeah, New Chapter is the company. New Chapter. I think they make the best one.
Can that be absorbed? I think,
Yeah.
I'm just doing for my friend,
Yes.
absorbed, just a vitamin in general, a multivitamin,
Oh,
that can be
yes.
best absorbed.
Yeah, I would go with New Chapter's multivitamin. That's probably my favorite. If you're going soy-free, then Mega Food is the other
The
company.
what?
Mega Food too. They're really good.
All of the celiac websites recommend a vitamin called Celiac, and I just
So gosh,
wondered
yeah.
if that was a come on.
Yeah, a lot of them. I don't think I have a connection here, but a lot of them are really bad. If you want, I mean, please feel free to contact me through email on that card, and I'll look it up, because that's one of my specialties is vitamin research, and they use a lot of chemicals that are really technically, so I'd like to look at it firsthand, because I don't know. Yes, ma'am?
How do soy products and whey, like whey protein, how do they affect the whole celiac problem and the gluten issue?
Well, there's a cross-reactivity in some with casein, which is not found in whey products, which is the sticky disulfide bonded, the glue that they make Elmer's glue from, that's really casein.
So whey's better?
Whey is, yeah, it's
Whey
a
is
liquid protein that's extremely assimilable. You throw it away, usually when you make cheese.
With a powder protein,
Yeah, and soy, actually, I'm fond of organic soy, especially fermented. I believe a lot of what we're being told about soy is just complete misunderstanding and actually intentional mistruth when it comes to soy. So I don't think I think it's a medicine more than anything. I wouldn't consume it in large quantities. It's
Well,
more-
I'm allergic to soy products.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so I have a duplicate problem here.
Yeah.
So
Right, so it sounds like it, but with intestinal permeability, probably it would be likely that you'd be allergic. Now, the allergies, though, the soy often are from the fact that it's genetically modified. It has literally an herbicide saturated throughout it because the plant was designed to be resistant to glyphosate, which is Roundup. So they saturate entire fields, carpet bomb them with this highly toxic herbicide. It goes into the plant, and they are able to survive, but they undergo a lot of oxidative stress, and a lot of the residue is in there. So a lot of people with soy allergies are actually allergic to this. It's almost like an Agent Orange-like chemical. In fact, the company that makes it made Agent Orange, Monsanto. So it's really, that's just the tip of the iceberg, really, with soy. So if you culture it, they did a lot of research on this. People with classically defined soy allergies, when you culture it, they don't show any antigenicity. So it may be possible for you to do some cultured soy. New Chapter's vitamins are cultured soy, actually. But for you, I would probably focus more on substances that modulate immunity, balance the poles out. So like probiotics are probably the ideal thing. Some of them actually heal the intestinal wall, like Saccharomyces boulardii, which is a yeast actually, kombucha. So there's a lot you can do technically. You go on my site even and look up intestinal permeability, and there's a whole section on things that help.
If you get rid of the intestinal impermeability, would that eliminate a lot of the food allergies or food intolerances?
Absolutely, yeah, because that permeability is really a huge problem. A lot of like anyone taking low dose aspirin has some permeability. A new study was released last year that showed the majority are bleeding occultly, subclinically from taking low dose aspirin, and so that's a big
What
problem.
if you take high dose aspirin? See, I had a stroke and they have
Yeah, then that's definitely something that you want to offset. I do have a section on my site on aspirin-induced toxicity, and a lot of it concerns gastroprotective effects, so that you don't end up with the ulceration as a secondary effect. So there are
What do all
things.
look for in your site?
If you go in the search bar on top and write in aspirin-induced toxicity, there's a whole page just on things that help reduce it. And there's a whole page on the adverse effects of aspirin too. So you'll probably see that. Yes,
What
ma'am?
about wines and liquors? I mean, I was
Wines and
told,
liquors.
I was
Yeah.
told always get a potato vodka, not the
Oh,
wheat-based vodka.
Yeah.
Red wine versus white wine.
For someone with celiac disease, it's probably a good idea. But keep in mind that
That's a good
all
idea?
is to go with a potato vodka versus one that's grain-based. But
potato
Al-
vodka.
alcohol does actually increase intestinal permeability just generally. So you have to be a little careful. But it's such a great anesthetic when you're a human being just dealing with the reality of life that just go.
So, is there advantage to red wine versus white wine?
Red is much better because there was Veritol and other flavonoids, so I would always go with red if possible. And alcohol itself is cardioprotective. In moderate quantities, it protects your heart. It's well known because it's a mild blood thinner, but resveratrol is a big part of it though too.
You mentioned probiotics, how does that fit into this picture?
Well, probiotics are essential because they're immunomodulatory. Many of the immune factors we produce actually are generated in the gut. And so when you have celiac or any type of intolerance to wheat, it will help to correct, in theory, the extremes, Th2, Th1 dominance and go either way. So probiotics, I mean, they produce most of the vitamins we know of. Most of our neurotransmitters are produced in our gut. It's called the enteric nervous system. Same tissue that your brain's made from is the tissue in your gut. So when you take probiotics, the bacteria actually send a signal to the brain through the vagus nerve. So it's like the visceral brain that you feel in your gut is just as valid as your own brain. There's neurotransmitters secreting neurons throughout your entire stomach.
So
it's
probiotics are good for a lot of GI issues? including celiac?
Yeah, in fact, the idea is anyone who doesn't get probiotics on a daily level will probably end up with some ailment or imbalance, because we were co-evolved for so long. We need at least 4,000 different strains to be healthy, which is also why the quality of our soil is so important, because the vegetables you grow in it actually contain the bacteria. That's another argument for eating raw food, at least daily, something raw. And so that's so you can get it through your food, in other words.
Okay. There's so many probiotics though. I go into a
Oh, I
store
know.
and I go into Whole Foods and it blows my mind.
And it is.
How do you know what to do?
Well, I personally have vetted one company I like, which is Garden of Life, because they have the chain of custody for the delivery all figured out. It's all refrigerated from the manufacturer to the warehouse to our store. In Florida especially, if you're coming down for season, some of the probiotics in the refrigerator were delivered UPS. The temperature's 160 in there, so they're dead, unfortunately. Now, interesting enough, you can kill probiotics and they still have immunomodulatory effects. So some people still get a benefit, and there's a placebo effect, but it's really important to get a raw one. I like the foods that are cultured, like if you get, like we have Bubby's sauerkraut raw, which has just 30, 40 different strains of lactobacillus, kombuchas, natto, there's a probiotic coconut water, so you can get it a lot from your food. That's really one of the best ways to do it, actually. But Garden of Life makes one called raw probiotic, and I take it daily. It's instead of a flu shot. That's what I personally do, to make sure I don't get
Is it liquid?
That's a capsule. Yeah, it's pretty good.
My neurologist has told me that I should take a baby aspirin daily because he recommends it to keep the blood thin, to get up into the veins, going up into the brain.
Yep.
That's very important.
Well, here's the thing. I can't give you any medical advice, of course, but I have index research that indicates that the main issue with aspirin, especially with stroke prevention, is that although it reduces ischemic stroke, which is lack of blood and oxygen to the brain, it increases hemorrhagic stroke incidence. And I even have some studies on it increasing ischemic stroke incidence. So the problem with aspirin is it's a synthetic chemical. It was modeled after what's found in white willow bark, but it is completely produced through total synthesis, so it is actually petrochemical. And so anyone who thinks that a lack of aspirin, is behind stroke or any other heart disease is I think a bit diluted. If the FDA were proposed to allow this to be a drug today, if it wasn't grandfathered in, there was no way it would be approved because the research is so clear. I've indexed probably over 60 different diseases connected to aspirin, the underreported adverse effects. And the thing that is so disturbing to me is they've done cross-comparison studies with pine bark, which they've even done long flight, deep vein thrombosis studies. It was superior in one study at being a antiplatelet, lower dose than needed with aspirin, and it didn't increase the bleeding time as, it was like a minute and a half increased bleeding time with aspirin. That's the main issue. It works too well. And if you fall and you have an accident, that minute and a half of bleeding is enough to really do quite a lot of damage. So my understanding is that even just elevating your plasma blood vitamin C levels will significantly reduce your stroke risk. A lot of research on that. And that's
How do you do that?
Oh, fruits and vegetables. Yeah, you can't do it through vitamin C tablets because the ascorbic acid is really not vitamin C. Plasma vitamin C levels only reflect the food form. And so it's really, that's my understanding of cardiovascular disease. It's really caused by a lack of vegetables and fruits and then excessive consumption of things that are probably not good for our hearts. It's kind of simplistic, but it's tough because the standard of care is to use aspirin. And so if a physician, cardiologist, neurologist didn't tell you that, they would probably be liable. So I don't blame them for not presenting an option because they really legally can't. I can't say anything legally, but the research on the National Library of Medicine does tell a different story. So I would definitely, that's why the site exists in part, was it was for clinicians and doctors and researchers to take the research and kind of get a better perspective, but I found that they weren't as open to it, so now it's just people like you and I trying to figure it out. But,
So you wouldn't even recommend taking it like twice a week, just not at all?
well, yeah, I can't make recommendations on that, but personally, I wouldn't ever take aspirin because I know there are substances which have similar, if not
Yeah.
superior profiles. And even human studies exist, like I said. If you want to email me, I'll send it right to you. You can share it with your physician. And it's pycnogenol, which has so many side benefits. And not just for stroke or antiplatelet properties, but for embolism and so many other side benefits.
Can you spell that?
Oh, it's known as pycnogenol, French maritime pine bark extract. It's Pycnogenol. It's PYCONOL. I'm sorry. PYCNOGENOL. It's also known as pine bark. Yeah, so that's another one that you might benefit from knowing about. Yes,
But don't do them together.
oh, no, yes, thank you. Yeah, that's why you need your physician to help you with this. And, I can get you the research to get to that person if they want to help you with it. I hope there are some good people out there trying to be integrative.
Do you have anything on your website about the blood type and diet?
I don't actually I have a small section, but in a way, I know him quite well because he's created a similar database to my own. And so, yeah, he's got great perspective on things. Did you speak?
One more question about probiotics. How do you know, even if they're in the refrigerator in the store, how do you know that they have arrived?
You have to ask.
Refrigerated?
Yeah.
You have to ask.
You wouldn't know because
Right.
invariably, if they're in the refrigerator, they generally weren't refrigerated. There's only a few companies that take that
And
precaution.
you say Garden Life?
Garden Life does it, Renew Life, there's a few, so, yeah. Well, great. Well, hey, it's been a pleasure having you all. and
Thank you.